I never thought I'd live to bury my only child. People like to say time dulls the pain, but I've learned that when it's your child, time does no such thing. It just teaches you how to cry in private and smile in public, so people stop asking if you're okay. My name is Mabel. I'm 63, and for most of my life, I lived quietly in the left wing of a modest twin flat I co owned with my late husband. We bought the whole property in 1987. Solid brick, nothing fancy, just a practical structure with two separate homes under one roof. One for us, one to rent out. A simple plan. My husband was a practical man. He worked for the post office, saved like a squirrel, and believed in one thing above all else: ownership. Don't rent what you can own, Mabel, he used to say. So we bought that building and over the years even invested in the other flats down the street, slowly, quietly. No fanfare, just security. When David, our only son, got married, we offered him and his wife Trina the other half of the twin flat. Rent-free. It wasn't even a question. That was our boy. We wanted him close. He was our world. Trina, well, she never liked me much. I sensed it from the beginning. She saw me as competition rather than family. Where I come from, being a daughter-in-law meant joining a family. For her, it meant replacing it. I swallowed a lot for David's sake. The quiet digs, the side glances, the way she'd take over every holiday like she was doing me a favor. I let it slide when she told her mother that I hovered like an old mosquito, even though I'd just spent the whole afternoon watching her boys so she could clear her head. I swallowed it all, because I loved David. And then, just like that, he was gone. A heart attack in his sleep. 38. Fit, healthy, no warning. One day we were laughing in the kitchen, and the next I was staring at his casket like my entire body had turned to ice. The days after were a blur. Funeral arrangements, visitors, casseroles, prayers. I remember Trina weeping like she'd lost a limb, but in my gut, something felt off. Cold, almost calculated. I chalked it up to grief. I tried to give her space. I even tiptoed around my own house, thinking maybe being quiet was a form of kindness. Then, exactly 3 days after the burial, it happened. I knocked on her side of the flat to bring her some fresh soup. Nothing fancy, just a gesture. She opened the door halfway like she didn't even want to see my face. "I thought you might not feel like cooking," I said, holding out the thermos. She didn't take it, just stood there, arms crossed. Then she said it. "I think it's time you found your own place, Mabel. This house isn't really big enough for both of us anymore. I need space now. For me and the boys." I blinked. "What?" "You have your life," she said, as if I were some visitor. "You're still young enough to get your own place, somewhere more suited to your needs." It didn't hit me right away. I just stood there. But her next words landed like a slap. "Look, I don't want this to get awkward, but I need you to start looking. I want to renovate and expand into your side. Knock down a few walls. The boys need room. This is our home now." That's when I realized what she was doing. With David gone, she assumed control. Assumed I had no claim. No rights. "My name is on the deed," I said, more confused than angry. She gave me a pitying smile. "David and I were married. That counts. You've just been living here. You don't even pay rent." That word again. Just. Just the woman who raised him. Just the one who let her move in for free. Just the person who stayed up with the babies when she was out finding herself. Just the one who kept this whole building afloat for decades while she chased online boutiques and spiritual retreats. I turned around, soup still in my hands, and went back to my flat. Sat on my couch. Didn't even turn on the light. She thought she had the upper hand now. thought she could claim the house by widowhood and willpower. But she didn't know what I knew. David didn't own the building. He never did. The house, both sides of the twin flat, and in fact, the entire row of duplexes on that street, belonged to me. Paid for, registered, maintained. The paperwork sat neatly in my file cabinet. The rent from the other units came into my bank account. The taxes came out of my name. And every single structural decision ever made on this building went through me. In her mind, I was the sad, aging mother-in-law overstaying her welcome. In reality, she was living in a house she didn't even own, trying to push out the woman who did. That night, as I sipped the same soup she'd refused, I made a quiet promise to myself. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't beg. But I would remind her, gently but unmistakably, exactly whose name was on the dotted line. And I'd make sure she never forgot it. To be continued. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, where Mabel starts to turn the tide. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. No, anger is hot, fast, and burns out. What I felt was cold. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry. No, anger is hot, fast, and burns out. What I felt was cold, quiet, like frost climbing up a window. She wanted me gone. After all I'd done, all I'd given, Trina decided it was her time to expand, as if grief was a renovation project and I was just an old cabinet in the way. But that's fine. You see, one thing age teaches you is not to react. Let them talk. Let them underestimate you. While they perform, you prepare. By sunrise, I'd already pulled out the file cabinet from the spare room. Dusty, heavy, tucked behind my sewing table. Inside were neatly labeled folders. Deed, Block 17, lease agreements, tax filings, and trust docs David. I opened them one by one. There it was, the master deed, signed by my husband in 1991. Transferred fully to me in 2009 after his passing. I never moved it under David's name, not out of distrust, but because we were keeping the property as part of our retirement income plan. David always knew this. He told me plenty of times, "Mom, this is yours. I'm just grateful to live here." But Trina? She was never grateful, only ever entitled. She must have thought that with David gone, everything automatically passed to her. Maybe someone told her that. Maybe she just assumed. But she didn't know about the clause. See, 5 years ago, I'd had a proper trust drawn up. A smart, forward-thinking attorney helped me structure it so that in the event of my death, David would inherit the property gradually, and certainly not by default. But now David was gone, which meant the trust reverted fully back to me. No heirs, no claims, no loopholes. I smiled, not out of spite, just relief, because for the first time in days, I felt my spine straighten again. By the end of the week, Trina started making changes. Small ones at first. She had contractors come by just for quotes. Told the boys loudly in the front yard, "Soon we'll knock down that wall and make this one big house." She even asked one of the other tenants if they'd be okay with a bit of noise during renovations. "We'll be opening up Mabel's side soon." The nerve. But I said nothing. Just smiled and waved. Then came the letter. Typed. Folded neatly. Dropped in my mailbox like a polite threat. It read, "Dear Mabel, I hope you understand this is a difficult transition for all of us. As such, I'm officially asking you to vacate your portion of the home within 45 days to allow space for structural upgrades and accommodations for the children. I am willing to help you find a senior living option or subsidized apartment if needed. Sincerely, Trina." She thought I was broke. She thought I was helpless. She thought I'd scurry away like some fragile old mouse. So I wrote her back. Dear Trina, thank you for your concern. However, I won't be vacating anything. As the sole and legal owner of this property, I'll be reviewing your unauthorized renovation plans and taking the necessary steps to address your recent activities. Kindly refrain from further communication until you receive official correspondence from my lawyer. Regards, Mabel Thomas. I hand-delivered it, slipped it right into her doorframe, and knocked twice. 5 minutes later, I heard stomping. She banged on my door like the police. "What the hell is this?" she barked, holding up my letter. "That," I said calmly, "is a polite warning. You're not dealing with a landlord anymore, Trina. You're dealing with the landlady." "You can't just—" "I can, and I will. I've let you live here rent-free for 5 years. I paid for that roof, that plumbing, that heat you never thank me for. And now you want to knock down walls in a house you don't even own." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She wasn't used to this version of me. She was used to the grieving, quiet, compliant mother-in-law, the one who watched the grandkids and stayed out of her way. She didn't recognize the woman who wrote contracts, who held receipts, who paid every property tax without fail, who had been playing the long game since before she knew what manifesting meant. I closed the door, and then I called my attorney. Over the next 2 weeks, Trina got quiet. No more contractors, no more loud declarations. But that didn't mean she was done scheming. One of the tenants, Mrs. Valdez, came to me with a worried look. "Your daughter-in-law," she whispered, "has been asking around about property laws. She asked if she could buy you out. I told her she better check who actually owns this place before she starts dreaming." I thanked her, because if Trina wanted a game, she was about to get a full-blown chess match. I had lived a life building things, my marriage, my savings, my family. She'd lived chasing appearances, online attention, and shortcuts. Now she was about to learn the difference between building something and merely occupying it. And I had barely even begun. To be continued. No, let me know when you're ready for part 3. Some people think power comes from being loud, from stomping, threatening, banging on doors. But I've lived long enough to know better. Real power is quiet. It's in knowing the right person to call, the right document to send, the right moment to act. And Trina? She had no idea how deep my roots went. After I sent her that letter, things stayed civil, on the surface. She stopped the renovations, stopped knocking, even started forcing smiles when we passed each other in the hallway. But her eyes? Cold. Calculating. She was waiting. She thought if she stayed quiet long enough, I'd get tired, that I'd pack a few bags, call a cousin, and disappear into some senior complex with bingo nights and shared laundry rooms. She didn't know I'd been quietly working behind the scenes. The first thing I did was call Marcus, my late husband's old friend, now a retired civil litigator. He'd handled the trust paperwork years ago, and when I told him what was happening, he laughed. Trina's about to learn the difference between living in a house and owning one. We went over the deed. The trust, the lease agreements, everything was airtight. Then Marcus asked the question I'd already been thinking about. "Do you want her out, Mabel?" I hesitated. I wasn't a cruel woman. I didn't want to throw my grandkids out. I'd helped raise them. I knew which one refused peas and which one wet the bed at age 5 and cried in my arms at 2 a.m. I had rocked them to sleep, for heaven's sake. But their mother? She'd made herself very clear. She wanted me gone. She wanted to bulldoze the space where I grieved my son, cooked Sunday dinners, folded his baby clothes before he ever met her. So yes, I told Marcus, I want her out. The second thing I did was check the lease. See, I had put David and Trina on a month-to-month lease agreement when they moved in, just for formality. Rent-free, yes, but still a contract. And in that contract, I had included a clause that any major change in the family structure, like, say, the death of one tenant, meant the lease was subject to reevaluation at the owner's discretion. In other words, she didn't have a leg to stand on. So Marcus helped me draw up the notice. It was formal, respectful, and legally binding. This letter serves as formal notice of termination of the current tenancy at Unit 2A, effective in 60 days. Please begin arrangements to vacate the premises by that date. If you wish to discuss a rental agreement moving forward, please contact the property owner to negotiate new terms. I signed it, slipped it into an envelope, delivered it by hand. This time, no knocking. I just tucked it behind her designer wreath and walked away. She came storming up 2 hours later. "You're evicting me?" she said, waving the paper like it was a court summons. "Are you out of your mind?" I stayed seated, calm. "No, Trina," I said, sipping my tea. "I'm just enforcing what's always been true. You're kicking your grandchildren out of their home?" "I'm removing an ungrateful tenant who forgot her place," I replied evenly. "The children can stay, with you or with me. That part's up to you." That stopped her, because I knew something she didn't know I knew. A few weeks ago, I'd gotten a knock on my door. It was Trina's former friend, Jessica. They'd had a falling out, apparently, and Jessica, bless her nosy soul, had stories to tell. Turns out, Trina had been planning this takeover long before David died. She used to say once the house was hers, she'd knock it all down and build a duplex, Jessica whispered. Said you were old and stuck in the past. Called you a speed bump in her life plan. I didn't flinch, because I already suspected. But what Jessica said next chilled me. She had David take out a life insurance policy 2 years ago. Big one. She made him increase it just last year. Said it was smart planning. I felt a weight settle in my chest. I didn't want to think the worst, but a mother's instinct is loud. And now, with the way she was scrambling after his death, calling contractors, making legal threats, trying to erase me like a stain, something didn't sit right. So I did the third thing. I contacted the insurance company myself. As David's mother, I wasn't a beneficiary, but I asked simple questions about the date of the policy, the increase, the payout. Then I called my friend Naomi, who used to work in insurance fraud investigations, just to see if there were red flags. She promised to look into it discreetly. Meanwhile, Trina panicked. She started asking other tenants if they'd vouch for her, claimed I was losing it mentally, even hinted I might be unsafe to live around children. So I did the fourth thing. I scheduled a full psych eval and medical checkup, passed with flying colors, got it in writing. Then I had Marcus send her a letter reminding her of the penalties for defamation and slander, especially as a tenant in breach of lease. That shut her up fast. By the end of the 60 days, Trina hadn't packed a single box. She thought I was bluffing. So on day 61, I filed a formal eviction notice with the court. She screamed when she got it. Said I was tearing her family apart. But she never once mentioned David's name, because he was never the point for her. Control was. But what she didn't know was that I had one final move left, and it had nothing to do with the lease. It had to do with something Naomi found in the insurance records, something that changed everything. Some truths don't come crashing through your front door. They slip in quietly, like a draft under an old window, cold, unsettling, and impossible to ignore once you feel it. That's exactly how the truth about David's insurance policy came to me. Naomi, my friend and quiet investigator, called one afternoon. No small talk. I need you to sit down, Mabel. David never told me he took out a second life insurance policy. He and Trina already had one through his job, enough to cover funeral expenses, debts, and some cushion for the kids. But Naomi discovered another policy, privately issued, taken out just 14 months before his death. It was worth $850,000. And guess who pushed for it? Who filled out most of the forms? Who made herself the sole beneficiary? Trina. Naomi said it wasn't illegal. But the timing and the wording on the beneficiary declaration sent red flags waving in her gut. Do you remember David mentioning any new debts, large purchases, or health concerns? She asked. No, I said. He was getting healthier. He'd started running again. He'd even lost 12 pounds. Said he wanted to live longer for the kids. Naomi sighed. Mabel, the policy had a double indemnity clause. I paused. What does that mean? If the death is deemed accidental, the payout doubles. David had collapsed in the kitchen, clutching his chest. No history of heart disease, no stroke, no aneurysm. The cause of death? Acute cardiac arrest of undetermined origin. He'd been drinking a smoothie Trina made. That always bothered me, because David hated bananas. Couldn't stand the texture or smell. And yet, the cup we found beside him reeked of them. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore what came next. Naomi dug deeper and discovered that Trina had made 2 attempts to cash the insurance before the autopsy was complete. Both were denied pending final medical examiner reports. After those reports showed undetermined origin, Trina pushed hard for a fast payout. Claimed it was an accidental reaction to vitamins or stress. Insisted she needed the funds to keep her family afloat. She received $1.7 million within 6 weeks of his death. And yet, she hadn't paid off the mortgage, which was minimal, hadn't set aside trust accounts for the kids, hadn't even bought them new school clothes. What she had done was order custom cabinetry, book spa trips, and start consulting architects for a brand new 2-story remodel, tearing up everything David and I had built together. That same night, I went to the closet where I kept David's things. In a small wooden box, I found something I hadn't looked at in months. His journal. David had started keeping one after his therapist recommended it for his anxiety. I never read it while he was alive. It felt too personal. But now, I flipped through the entries. At first, it was ordinary stuff. Work frustrations. Funny moments with the kids. Then I found an entry dated 2 months before he died. Trina's pushing me about the new insurance again. Says it's smart and that she read it doubles if something happens. I told her it makes me feel weird, like I'm signing my death certificate. She laughed it off. I didn't. My hands shook. The next entry chilled me. Tried to bring it up again. She got icy, said I was being paranoid. But something's changed lately. She watches me like I'm already gone. I need to talk to Mom. I just don't want to worry her. He knew something wasn't right, but he trusted her. He always had. And now he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, staring at that journal, that smoothie cup etched into my memory, and the smirk Trina gave me when she told me this house would soon be hers. That's when I made my final decision. I wasn't just going to evict her. I was going to expose her. The next morning, I contacted Naomi again and Marcus, my lawyer. Together, they helped me draft a formal request to reopen the investigation into David's death. Marcus warned me the chances of an official homicide case were slim without new forensic evidence, but said the insurance company might be another story. Because if Naomi's suspicion was right, if Trina manipulated the situation to benefit from a double indemnity clause under false pretenses, that was insurance fraud. A felony. And the best part? The moment a fraud investigation is opened, all remaining assets are frozen. So I filed it. All of it. The journal copies, the payout dates, the smoothie detail, the pushy behavior, Naomi's findings, the lack of any medical reason for his death. And within 2 weeks, I got the call I'd been waiting for. Mrs. Benton? We're opening an inquiry into a suspected fraudulent claim involving Trina Benton. The very next day, Trina showed up at my door, panicked. Did you do something? She asked, breathless. My bank accounts are locked. I can't get to the trust. They're saying something about a fraud inquiry. What is this? I didn't blink. Oh, I said softly. Must be the fine print. She stared at me, horror creeping across her face. You crazy old witch. Careful, I said, calm as ever. Defamation's still a crime, just like fraud. She stormed off, and I watched from the window as her facade cracked for the first time. Because for all her power plays and threats, Trina had one fatal flaw. She underestimated me. The days after the fraud investigation began were tense but quiet. Trina avoided me completely, as if sheer avoidance could erase what was coming. Meanwhile, I leaned on Marcus, my lawyer, and Naomi to keep me updated on every little development. I wasn't a young woman with energy to burn, but I was sharper than I'd been in years. The insurance company launched their own audit, and within a month, they confirmed irregularities. Trina had indeed pressured David into the second policy, making herself the sole beneficiary without his fully informed consent. There were discrepancies in the medical reports submitted for the claim and inconsistencies in her statements. The evidence didn't prove foul play in his death itself. That would have been nearly impossible without a fresh autopsy or new forensic data, but it was enough to label her claim as fraudulent. The payout was immediately frozen. The insurance company moved to recover the $1.7 million that had already been paid. Meanwhile, Marcus prepared a civil suit to reclaim any funds spent under false pretenses. The best part was that the courts took a hard line on protecting the minor children's interests. Since David had made no other financial arrangements for them, the judge placed their inheritance into a court-controlled trust, which I was appointed to oversee. That meant Trina could not touch a penny without approval, ensuring the kids' futures were protected. But the real shock came when I requested a full title search and review of the property deeds. With Marcus's help, just to cover every angle. It turned out the entire block, the building where I'd lived for decades, was fully in my name. Not David's. Not Trina's. She thought she could kick me out because David and I were married, and this was her home now. But legally, the marriage gave her no ownership or tenancy rights beyond what I had granted. When I showed the court documents during the hearing where she tried to contest my rights, her lawyer was speechless. The judge didn't need to deliberate long. The law was crystal clear. I was the sole owner and rightful resident. Trina's eviction notice was reversed. Instead, she was ordered to vacate the premises within 30 days for non-payment of rent and breach of trust. The free rent she'd enjoyed suddenly became a liability she couldn't ignore. The final blow was the civil fraud lawsuit. The court awarded damages, legal fees, and restitution in my favor, with the judgment backed by liens on any property she owned elsewhere. By the time Trina packed up and left, her face pale and defeated, I was calm. No gloating, just the quiet satisfaction of a mother who fought for her family. I stood on the balcony one evening, looking over the block of flats bathed in sunset. My grandchildren played on the lawn below, unaware of the storm that had passed. David's death broke my heart. But losing my home, losing my family's legacy, that wasn't going to happen, not on my watch. I'd fought with everything I had, and I'd won, legally and morally. Some people say family is everything. I say family is trust. And when that trust is broken, the law is there to hold you accountable. Trina learned that the hard way, and so did I.